Welcome to the video tutorial for the Annual Budget Spreadsheet. In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to set up and use your new spreadsheet, step by step. If you found this video on YouTube and you'd like to get this spreadsheet for yourself, you can find the link in the description. And just a quick note that if you purchase this spreadsheet in a different color theme, don't worry, as all color versions work exactly the same. So this spreadsheet includes multiple tabs, but before making any changes on the other tabs, make sure to start here, in the Setup tab. At the top, you'll find a few useful links. Besides this main video tutorial, you can also watch the bonus video, where we share some extra tips on using the spreadsheet. And if you have any questions after watching, you can message us on Etsy, and we'll get back to you within 24 hours. Now, there are a few general rules that apply to this spreadsheet. First, you'll want to complete these 5 steps here on the Setup tab before moving on. And if you don't plan to use the Savings or Debt tabs, you can simply skip steps 4 and 5. On each tab, you'll also find an instructions section. For example, in the Payments tab, if you scroll to the right, you'll see these instructions. They explain whether any extra setup is needed, how to use that tab, and include some helpful tips and notes. You'll notice this minus sign here. So, if you want a cleaner view, you can click it to hide the instructions. If you ever want to see them again, just click the plus sign, and they'll show back up. Another important rule is that you should only edit the white cells. You shouldn't edit any colored cells or anything outside the tables, since those cells may contain formulas. For example, you can see that these 4 columns are colored, while the other columns are white. That means you should only enter data in the white columns. Because of this, all other cells are protected. So if you ever try to edit a cell that you're not supposed to change, you'll see a warning message pop up. If that happens, just click Cancel to leave it as it is. Alright, now let's start the setup with the first step. First, you should set your start date. So for example, let's say we'll start in January. Next, you should choose your budgeting method. Here you have 2 different options. The first option is the carryover budget, where any leftover money at the end of the month rolls over into the next month. The second option is the zero-based budget, where every month starts from 0 and all of your income is planned intentionally. If you choose the carryover budget, you'll also need to enter your starting balance. This is the money that will be available to use in your first month. So, for example, let's say we currently have $500. All right, next up is filling in your categories. You can enter up to 10 income categories, 20 savings and debt categories, and 40 expense and bill categories. If you ever need space for more categories, just message us on Etsy and we can customize it for you. So for income, let's say we have a salary and some freelance work. For savings, maybe we're saving for a new laptop and a future vacation. We might also have an emergency fund and a general savings fund. For expenses, we can add groceries and transportation, and maybe entertainment and shopping. Now for bills, we'll go with rent and electricity, and we can also add internet and phone. And for debts, let's say we have a credit card, a student loan, and a car loan. You can name these however you like. Just make sure each category has a unique name so there aren't any duplicates. Now, when you scroll down a bit, you'll find the next step, which is setting up your recurring payments. Here you have 3 tables, 1 for income, 1 for bills, and 1 for debt. And they all work exactly the same way. If a category is recurring, like your salary, you should first set the frequency. So choose how often this payment repeats. You can see that there are multiple options available. Let's say, for example, that you're getting paid bi-weekly. Next, enter the start date. This should be the date of the next upcoming payment. So for example, the first payment might be on January 2nd. Then enter the amount. Let's say we're getting paid $2,000 every 2 weeks. The end date is optional. You can use it for payments that will eventually stop. For example, if you've canceled a subscription or fully paid off a debt. In those cases, simply enter the date of the last payment, and that payment won't appear after that date anymore. If a category isn't recurring, like freelance work, where income isn't on a fixed schedule, you can simply leave that row blank. I'll show you later how to log those irregular payments. Now, let's set up the recurring bill payments. Let's say all of these bills have a monthly frequency. Here's a quick tip to save time if you have multiple bills with the same frequency. Instead of selecting monthly for each one, choose it once. Then hover over this small circle and drag it down to fill the rest. Now let's enter some example dates and amounts. So rent might be due on the 1st, electricity on the 12th, internet on the 20th, and phone on the 15th. And for the amounts, let's say rent is $17.50, electricity is $150, internet is $75, and phone is $85. Lastly, scroll a bit further down to set up the recurring debt payments. Again, let's quickly set all of these to a monthly frequency. For the start dates, let's use January 7th, January 4th, and January 26th. And for the amounts, let's enter 100, 200, and 600. By setting this up once, you'll save a lot of time throughout the year, since you won't need to manually log these same transactions every month. When you scroll down, you'll reach the next step, which is the savings setup. Here you'll see 2 different tables. That's because you can set up your savings goals in 2 ways: as sinking funds or as ongoing savings. Sinking funds work best for short to medium-term goals where you know both the goal amount and the goal date. Ongoing savings, on the other hand, are better for flexible goals or funds with no specific end date, where you save regularly or whenever you can. You'll also find a more detailed explanation of both options directly in this section. Now let's fill in a few examples. For sinking funds, we'll use the laptop and vacation, since those are medium-term goals with clear amounts and dates. So for the laptop, let's say the goal is $1,500 and we haven't saved anything yet. We'll start in January, and let's say we want to reach this goal by June. You can see that the monthly goal is calculated automatically. That means you'd need to save $300 each month to stay on track. For the vacation, let's say the goal is $2,500 and we've already saved $500. We'll start in January and set the goal date for September. And here you can see the monthly goal comes out to $250. One important thing to know is that you can't set the same goal in both tables. So you'll notice these rows in the ongoing savings table are colored as a reminder, since those goals are already set as sinking funds. Now, for ongoing savings, we'll use the emergency fund and general savings. For the emergency fund, let's say we already have 1,000 saved, and we plan to add 150 each month. For general savings, we might have 500 saved, but no specific monthly goal in mind. In that case, you can simply leave this field empty. All right, the next step is the debt setup. First, you'll enter your start date. So for example, we'll start in January. Next, you'll choose your debt payoff strategy. You have 2 options here. The first is the debt snowball method, where you focus on paying off the smallest debts first and then work your way up. The second is the debt avalanche method, where you focus on debts with the highest interest rates to save money over time. So for this example, let's choose the debt avalanche method. The extra monthly payment is optional. This is for anyone who wants to pay a little extra each month on top of the minimum payment to speed things up. Now you'll fill in the details for each debt. For a credit card, let's say the balance is $3,000 with a minimum payment of $100 and an 18% interest rate. For a student loan, we might have a balance of $15,000, a $200 minimum payment, and a 5% interest rate. And for a car loan, let's say the balance is $30,000 with a $600 minimum payment and a 7% interest rate. At the bottom, you can see the total minimum payment, which in this case is $900. So if you'd like to pay $1,000 each month toward your debt, you can simply enter an extra $100 right here. All right, so that covers everything in the Setup tab. Now let's go to the monthly dashboard to plan our month. As you can see, there are 12 monthly tabs, one for each month of the year. You should always start in the first tab and then simply move to the next one as each new month begins. You'll notice that some planned amounts are already filled in. These are automatically calculated from your recurring payments. To see how this works, let's go to the Payments tab. Here, you can see a full list of all recurring payments for the entire year. For example, in January, we'll receive our salary on the 2nd, the 16th, and the 30th. Since each payment is $2,000, that means we're expecting a total of $6,000 for January. And as you can see, the planned amount for salary in January is exactly $6,000. If a category isn't recurring, like freelance income, the planned field will stay empty. In that case, you can manually enter an amount if needed. So for example, if you expect to earn $500 from freelance work this month, you can simply type that in. Now, your planned income is allocated across savings, debt, expenses, and bills. Bills and debt are already planned automatically from the recurring payments. For savings and expenses, you'll need to manually enter your planned amounts. So for savings, let's put $300 toward the laptop, $250 for vacation, $150 for the emergency fund, and $100 for general savings. For expenses, let's put $700 for groceries, $350 for transportation, $200 for entertainment, and $250 for shopping. Over here, you can always see how much money you still have left to budget. Right now, we have $1,240 left, but these are just example numbers. This will look more realistic once you enter your own amounts. If you still have some money left, you could put more toward savings or debt, or you can just leave it unallocated to give yourself some flexibility for unexpected costs. All right, and that would be all for planning the month. Now, for the actual amounts to update, you'll need to start making payments and recording transactions. Instead of having one big messy list, this spreadsheet has 4 different tabs where you can track everything more clearly. You have one tab for recurring payments, one for irregular payments, one for variable expenses, and when you scroll to the right, you'll also find a savings tab where you can track savings contributions and withdrawals. So let's first take a closer look at how the Payments tab works. One important thing to know here is that you should not edit these 4 colored columns. We left these columns unprotected on purpose, just so you can still use the filters for your transactions. So just make sure that you only enter data in the white cells. Now, as I already said, here you can see a list of all your recurring payments, and they're sorted in chronological order. So for example, you can see that rent is due on the 1st, salary is on the 2nd, and so on. When you make a payment, all you need to do is check it off and enter the date you actually paid it. We added this paid date column because we know a lot of people don't pay their bills exactly on the due date and want to track when the money actually leaves their account. So for example, let's say we received our salary on the 2nd, and on that same day we paid a few bills and debt payments. Rent is paid on the 2nd, and the student loan, credit card, and electricity are also paid on the 2nd. As you can see, rent was paid 1 day late, and these other payments were made a bit earlier, so we don't forget about them later. Now, if there's any variation in the amount, you can use this column over here. This is especially useful for variable bills that change from month to month. For example, we planned $150 for electricity, but maybe it was a really cold month and the heater was running more than usual. So the bill ends up being $170. If we enter that here and then go back to the monthly tab, you can see that $170 now shows up in the actual column for electricity. All right, now that we've covered recurring payments, let's move on to irregular payments. This tab is for any one-off or occasional income bills or debt payments that don't follow a regular schedule. To log an irregular payment, all you need to do is enter the date, select the transaction type, choose the category, and enter the amount. So for example, let's say we took on a freelance project and received a one-time payment of $500. That might have happened on January 5th. This would be an income transaction, the category would be freelance, and the amount is $500. Or for example, maybe the sink broke and we had to pay a plumber $125. Let's say that happened on January 6th. This would fall under bills, but since we don't yet have a category for this, let's quickly add one. So first we'll head over to the Setup tab. Then, right here in the second step under the Bills section, we're going to add a new category. And for example, let's just call it Home Repairs. Now, when we go back to the Irregular Payments tab, we can select Home Repairs from the drop-down. And for the amount, let's enter $125. So, again, this tab is where you'll log anything that doesn't fit into your regular payment schedule. Now let's go to the next tab, which is the Expenses tab. This is where you can track your daily variable spending, like groceries, shopping, transportation, and similar expenses. All you need to do here is log your expense transactions, and the totals will automatically update in the monthly dashboard. One helpful thing to know is that when you double-click on a date field, a small calendar pops up. This makes it quick and easy to select a date. So, let's choose January 3rd, and let's say we went grocery shopping and spent $100. Then maybe the next week on January 10th, we bought groceries again, this time for $200. Now, if we go back to the monthly dashboard and look at groceries, you can see a total of $300. And that's basically how simple it is. Just enter the date, choose the category, and enter the amount. Now, in each of these three tabs, you'll also find filter options. These small icons at the top of each column allow you to filter your transactions. For example, if you only want to see unpaid transactions, you can click the filter icon here. First, click Clear, then select False, and click OK. Now, you'll only see the unpaid transactions. To show everything again, just open the filter, click Select All, and click OK. The other filters work the same way, so you can also filter by date, transaction type, or category if you want, and this works the same in the Irregular Payments and Expenses tabs as well. Lastly, let's take a look at the Savings tab. Here you'll find the Savings Tracker, which works very similarly to the Expense Tracker. You just need to enter the date, choose the savings category, and enter the amount. So let's log one quick example. Let's say that on January 5th, we put some money towards the laptop fund, maybe around $100. Now, when we go back to the monthly tab, you can see that $100 shows up in the actual column for the laptop. To recap, the planned amounts are your projected monthly targets, and the actual amounts update automatically from your completed payments and transactions. The difference column shows how far you are from your planned numbers. For example, for salary, you can see a negative difference because we're $4,000 below the planned amount of $6,000. This same logic applies to savings and debt. So for the laptop fund, the difference is negative because we're $200 below the planned target of $300. For the credit card, the difference is 0 because the planned and actual amounts match. We use this logic because earning less, saving less, or paying less toward debt than planned is considered a negative outcome. For expenses and bills, though, the logic is reversed. Spending less than planned is actually a good thing. So for groceries, you can see a positive difference of $400. That means you still have that amount available to spend for groceries. However, for electricity, you can see a negative difference of $20 because the actual bill ended up being higher than what we planned. And for home repairs, you can also see a negative difference because we didn't plan any amount for it, but then ended up having to pay that irregular bill. You'll also notice that any negative amounts are highlighted in red, making them easy to spot at a glance. Over here you can see how much money you still have left to budget. Below that, you'll see how much money you actually have left to spend. And here you can also see whether there's any money spent over plan. Right now, this shows $145, since we're overspending on these two bills. When you scroll down, you'll find two progress charts. These show your monthly savings and debt progress. So far, we've completed about 13% of the monthly savings goal and 33% of the total debt payments. There's also a spending overview chart that shows how much money was spent each day of the month. We've only had a few transactions so far, but you can see that we spent the most on January 2nd. That's mainly from the rent, which alone is $17.50. Now let's scroll back up to the top. Here, you can also see the starting balance. Since this is the first month, the starting balance of $500 is pulled from the Setup tab. For any following month, the starting balance will come from whatever was left in the previous month. So for example, here we have $255 remaining in January, and when we switch to February, those $255 will automatically appear as the starting balance. Now, of course, this works if you selected the carryover budget during the setup. If you chose the zero-based budget, there would be no starting balance. Here you can also see that we've used 66% of our monthly spending budget. It basically shows how much of your total expenses and bills budget has been used so far. Anything over 100% means you're overspending. In the monthly summary section, you can see the planned and actual totals for income, savings, expenses, bills, and debt. At the top, you'll see the actual totals for the month. Below that is the balance overview chart, which shows how your balance changes day by day. You can also compare your planned versus actual totals here. If you scroll to the right, you'll find a few additional insights. At the top, you can see what percentage of your income went toward savings, spending, and debt. And on this chart, you can see where most of your money went. In this case, rent, followed by groceries, student loan, and so on. And that's basically everything you need to know about the monthly dashboard. For each new month, all you need to do is switch to the next monthly tab. One last thing to note is that your planned amounts for savings and expenses automatically carry over to future months, but you can always adjust them for any month as needed. All right, now let's go to the Calendar tab. So on this tab, you can see all your recurring payments in a calendar view. And first of all, you'll just want to set the correct month and year here. So let's say it's January. The year is already set. Here you can also choose whether your week starts on Sunday or Monday. Let's choose Sunday, for example. You'll also notice that today's date is highlighted in yellow on the calendar. One important thing here is to make sure your time zone is set correctly. To do that, click on File, then go to Settings. Here you'll see a time zone drop-down. Just select your time zone from the list and don't forget to click Save Settings. Now this calendar is fully automated. It pulls all its data from the Payments tab, and any completed payments will be automatically highlighted right here on the calendar, so you can easily see what's been paid. Over here on the left side, you'll find a few really useful insights that help you track your monthly progress. You can see your planned and remaining totals for bills, debt, and income. For example, this month we plan to spend a total of $2,080 on bills, and we still have $160 left to pay. Below that, you can see the next bill that's coming up. In this case, it's due on the 15th and the amount is $85. If we look at the calendar, you can see that this is the phone bill. Right after that, you can also see the next payday. That one is on the 16th, which is in 3 days, and as you can see, that's the salary. You can also see if there are any overdue bills. Right now, this shows 0, which means everything has been paid on time. Now, when you scroll down a bit, you'll find your monthly summary. Here, you can see that we have a total of 7 bills and debt payments this month. 4 of those are already paid, and 3 are still remaining. For income, we have a total of 3 paydays. We've already received the first salary, and 2 are still remaining. And lastly, you can see what percentage of your monthly payments have been completed. So far, we've completed 50% of bills, 67% of debt payments, and 33% of income payments. Altogether, that brings us to 50% completed for all payments this month. And that's basically how the calendar tab works. For a new month, all you need to do is update the month and year, and the calendar will reset automatically. All right, so the next tab we'll look at is the annual dashboard. First, you'll want to set the current month here. And just remember to update this whenever you're starting a new month. The start date is already set for you automatically. Everything on this tab updates from your payments and transactions, so you don't need to enter anything else here. In this table, you'll find the annual summary where you can see your planned and actual totals, the difference between them, and also what percentage of your income went toward savings, expenses, bills, and debt. There is also this table where you can compare your totals month by month. So for example, in January, we started with $500, earned $2,500, saved $100, spent $23.45, repaid $300 of debt, and finished the month with $255 left. Over here, you can also see your average monthly income, savings, spending, and debt. And down here, you'll find a detailed breakdown by category. This lets you compare the actual amounts for each month side by side. And of course, this becomes more useful once you have data for more months. Now, if we scroll back up to the top, you'll also see a few charts. These 2 charts have drop-downs in their titles, so you can easily switch between income, savings, expenses, bills, and debt. Here, for example, you're looking at the monthly income trend. This lets you compare your total income month by month. And using this drop-down, you can also switch this view to savings, expenses, and the other categories. On this chart, you can see a breakdown by category. So in this case, you can see that 80% of our total income comes from salary and 20% comes from freelance work. And again, you can use this drop-down to see the breakdown for other categories as well. Over here, you can see how your money has been allocated overall. The vast majority of it went toward bills, with smaller amounts going to debt, expenses, and savings. And lastly, here at the top, you'll find your annual totals for income, savings, spending, and debt. You can also see how your total spending is split between expenses and bills. All right, that's everything for the annual dashboard. Now let's move on to the Savings tab. So we've already covered the savings tracker. That's where you simply have to log your savings contributions and withdrawals. The rest of the savings dashboard is already fully set up for you, so there's no additional work needed here. All the information comes directly from the Setup tab, and your balances update automatically based on your savings transactions. Here, you'll see a detailed overview for each savings goal. So for the laptop fund, we've saved $100 so far. The goal is $1,500, which means there's $1,400 left to save. That puts us at about 7% of the goal. You can also see that the monthly goal is $300, that we've saved $100 this month, and that there are 5 months left until the goal date. Ongoing savings look a bit different. For example, for the emergency fund, there's no goal amount, so the left to save and progress fields don't apply. And since there's no end date, you'll see ongoing instead of a number of months. There are also a few charts that give you a quick overview. First, you can see that we've completed about 15% of the overall savings goal. Next, you'll see your savings balances sorted from highest to lowest. In this case, the emergency fund has the highest balance. Here you can also compare your current savings to your goals. For example, you can see that $500 has been saved for vacation, out of a goal of $2,500. At the top, you'll find your savings totals. As you can see, we've saved $600 in sinking funds and $1,500 in ongoing savings. Together, that adds up to a total of $2,100 saved so far. All right, and that's basically how the Savings tab works. So the next tab we'll take a closer look at is the Debt tab. This tab is almost ready to use. The only thing you need to do here is set the current month and year. So let's choose January again. The year is already set. Here you can see all your debts, and they're sorted based on the payoff strategy you selected during setup. Down below, you'll find the payment schedule. Basically, this is where you can see all those monthly payments for each debt. And you can also see how your balances will decrease month by month. And the way this strategy works is that once a debt is paid off, its payment rolls over to the next one. For example, the payment here is $600. But once that first debt is gone, its $200 payment is added to the next debt, so the new payment becomes $800. That same logic continues. 800 plus 200 becomes 1,000, and so on, until the very last debt is paid off. You can also adjust your planned payments for any specific month. Over here, you'll see this plus-minus column. This lets you increase or decrease your payment when needed. So let's say that in February, you know you'll receive a bonus and want to put some extra money toward debt. You can simply enter the amount over here. Let's say we want to put in an extra $300. And now you'll see that the payment for this first debt increases to $500. If you have a month with extra expenses and can't afford that extra $100 you usually pay each month, you can just put in a minus $100 here like this, and that drops the payment to $100, which is the monthly minimum for a credit card. Over here, you'll see a detailed overview for each debt. You can see the current balance, the payoff date, how many months are left, and what percentage of the debt has already been paid off. You can also see your planned monthly payment, how much you've actually paid this month, and how much is still left to pay. For example, for the credit card, you can see that we've paid $100. That's the monthly minimum we've covered in the Payments tab. Now, this remaining $100 is the extra amount that we added during the debt setup, if you remember. That extra amount was added to our debt repayment plan, and it's automatically applied to this first debt, which is the credit card. To record those extra debt payments, you will use the Irregular Payments tab. So, let's log that extra $100 for the credit card. For example, this might have happened on the 7th. it's a debt transaction. The category is credit card, and the extra amount we paid is $100. Now, if we go back to the Debt tab, you can see that we've paid $200 in total for the credit card this month, and there's nothing left to pay. Over here, you'll see your debt-free date. That's when all your debts are fully paid off. You can also see what percentage of your total debt has already been paid. At the very top, you'll find your debt totals. This includes your current balance, how much you've repaid so far, your total monthly payment, and your interest. And that's really everything you need to know about the Debt tab. Just don't forget to update the month and year when a new month starts. All right, now let's move on to the Net Worth tab. We added this tab for anyone who wants to keep track of their net worth over time. The start date here is already set for you automatically. If you'd like, you can also set a net worth goal. So for example, let's say you'd like to reach a net worth of $100,000. Next, you'll want to fill in your assets and liabilities along with their starting values. To keep things organized, assets are grouped into 4 main categories. These include cash and bank accounts, investments, properties, and other assets like vehicles, jewelry, art, and similar things. Liabilities work in a similar way. You have credit cards, loans, and a section for any other liabilities you might have. Let's add a few examples so you can see how this works. Under cash and bank accounts, we might have a checking account with a balance of $1,800. Then we can add a savings account with a balance of $10,000. And let's also add cash. So let's say we currently have around $400 in cash. Now let's scroll down and add a few examples for liabilities as well. Let's say we have 2 credit cards. The first one might have a balance of $2,500, and the second credit card might have a balance of $1,500. Now, when we scroll back to the top, you can see a summary table here. It shows that our total assets are $12,200, and our total liabilities are $4,000. The net worth is calculated as assets minus liabilities, so in this case, our net worth is $8,200. And the way this tab works is that at the end of each month, you simply update the values of your assets and liabilities. That way, your net worth updates automatically, so you can see exactly how you're doing over time. So for example, let's say that at the end of January, we now have $2,000 in the checking account, $10,500 in the savings account, and $250 in cash. Over here, you can see your growth, so we're up $200 in checking, up $500 in savings, and down $150 in cash compared to our starting values. Now let's also update the January values for liabilities. Let's say we made the minimum payments on both credit cards this month. That means we now owe $2,300 on the first card and $1,350 on the second card. You can see that those balances went down by $200 and $150. And that's basically how the Net Worth tab works. Over here, you'll also find a few charts. This chart lets you compare your net worth month by month. And these 2 charts show a breakdown of your assets and liabilities. You'll also see drop-downs here, which let you switch between a high-level view and a more detailed breakdown by individual categories. For example, in this view, you can see that all of our assets are currently in cash and bank accounts. If we switch to the detailed view, you can see that most of the money is in the savings account, then in the checking account, and just a small amount in cash. And lastly, up here at the top, you can see your total assets and liabilities, your current net worth and growth, and how much you still have left to reach your net worth goal. All right. And the last tab is the Bonus tab. This tab is completely optional. It's here for anyone who wants to track extra savings or extra income. So things like skipping takeout, selling something you don't need anymore, canceling subscriptions, or any other small wins. If you decide to use this tab, you'll simply log those wins here. So let's say that on January 2nd, we cooked dinner at home instead of eating out. You can add a short note like this, and let's say we saved $18. Now let's add another one. For example, we sold some old clothes online, and this time we earned about $35. Over here, you can see that we saved 18, earned 35, and together that adds up to 53. We've logged 2 wins so far, and the average comes out to around $27. Here, you can compare how much you've saved versus how much you've earned overall. And this chart shows the same thing, but broken down month by month. Again, if you don't want to use this tab, you can simply right-click on it and either hide it or delete it. So that's how the entire spreadsheet works, and that's it for this video. If you have any questions, feel free to message us on Etsy, and make sure to also check out the bonus tips video. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy using the spreadsheet.